Hey, what is up, everybody?
Welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast, episode 136. Today we're getting spooky once again and talking about a really dark case for Crimetober. We are going to be talking about the Dardeen family massacre.
Yes, unsolved to this day.
Yep, unsolved, and one of those where you just don't even have a real inkling of what you think it could be. I mean, there's so many possibilities. You can really theorize yourself even.
Yeah, it's surprising that this one isn't more well known, honestly. I mean, it's really crazy what happens with this poor family. But
yeah, and the family has been really trying to raise awareness about the case, but a lot of programs and TV shows won't pick it up, or documentaries and stuff like that, because it's so brutal.
It is.
It really is. Like, proceed with caution for sure.
This episode is brought to you by ExpressVPN, care of Simply Safe and Honey. So thank you guys for sponsoring the show.
Also, I just wanted to mention that this week on the Sesh, Janelle and I did a Halloween-themed episode. We called it a spooky sesh, and we talked about a bunch of little stories from history that are really scary and dark, and freaky stuff that you may not know about. And I think you guys would really like that episode, so I just wanted to mention it, and we'll link it in the description box.
Yes, link it in the description. It's good. They're like short stories that wouldn't make it on Mile Higher, but they're still really interesting. Some of them are about like cryptids, some of them are true crime. And then also we're doing a giveaway, y'all.
Yeah.
So,
oh, yeah, we are.
And a
We're
little
doing
contest. If you guys want to be a part of a fun Halloween contest, check out our episode on how to enter.
Yeah, it'll explain how to enter for the costume contest, the pet contest, and the pumpkin carving contest.
That's right.
And there's prizes, people. Go check it out. But before we get into the Dardeen case, we do have a few really interesting news stories that came out this week. Some of them are true crime related. One of them is actually related to a case we recently covered, the Scott and Lacey Peterson case.
Yeah.
Some really big news. The court just came out and said they're going to re-examine Scott Peterson's murder convictions because of a juror's answers to their pre-trial questions. So it's pretty crazy. And I know we're going to have a lot of,
yeah, it's very controversial case.
Different opinions on this. Yeah. Most people are pretty pissed because a lot of people have just assumed that he's definitely guilty and have accepted that, which I understand.
Yeah, I understand that too, but I think it's super important that he does get this second look because our judicial system is so messed up. And you got to remember that, like, obviously in some cases you're going to feel a certain type of way, but then there's others out there where, there's clearly misjustice happening as far as, legal proceedings and things like that. And they get totally screwed because of things with the jury and things like that. So I think it's important for all cases. We can't just single this out with Scott Peterson because we don't like Scott Peterson or we think he killed Lacey. And, either way, I think he needs, this should happen. I mean, our judicial system should be working for everybody.
Yeah. And if anything, we'll take one more look at it and maybe find out that it was him, or we find out that it was someone else. Maybe there's more evidence to look at too. It just gets me so much. There's that robbery across the street from her house. If you didn't hear our episode, definitely go listen. And we definitely got some feedback for just even saying that we think it's a possibility that Scott didn't do it. Yeah. And I'm so torn on it because I really don't like Scott and I get the worst vibes from him. And emotionally, I feel like he did it. But logically, I'm like, where is the evidence? You need so much evidence to really prove 100%. And when there's other possibilities that do fit, that you can't rule out, that just gets me, You don't want the wrong person in jail just so that everyone can feel good at the end of the day. Exactly.
We got to take the emotions out of it. This is somebody's life that hangs in the balance. And, there's way too many people who are literally being executed who are innocent or on death row.
Right.
Because of the way the legal system works and issues with the juries. I mean, juries, you're dealing with human beings that make mistakes, lie, and vote with emotion. So,
and if you didn't know, this is a death penalty case. So it's serious.
So apparently the issue is, and the reason why the Supreme Court of California is doing this at all is because juror number 7 committed prejudicial misconduct by not disclosing her prior involvement with other legal proceedings, including but not limited to being the victim of a crime. So apparently when this juror was 4.5 months pregnant back in 2000, she filed a lawsuit against a woman saying she was in fear for her unborn child. And Peterson's lawyers say the juror's answers on her questionnaire were false and that she committed misconduct, which raised the presumption of prejudice. So to me, this makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And, this wasn't the only issue with the jury on his trial. I mean, it was a real mess. And just, unfortunately, the media really blew this one, out of proportion to the point where there just was no way possible for him to get a fair trial. And it happens. And so I think it's only fair that, you know, if there is enough evidence to prove that he did this, then absolutely, you know, let's prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. Let's, you know, give him, you know, the justice that.
Yeah, it was horrific, but don't we want to be sure? I think with something like this, you need to be sure.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they're doing it. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
It'll
I mean,
probably
his
take a long time.
death sentence already was overturned too. So that was the other thing that happened a little while back. So, I mean, they're definitely working towards looking at the whole thing. So we'll see if he gets a new trial, complete new trial.
All right, this one you guys tagged me in so many times on Twitter. There has been a man flying in a jetpack spotted over the skies in Los Angeles.
I didn't even hear about this. I'm surprised too. I usually hear about anything unidentified in the sky. But
Well, you've been trying to be off social media more.
true.
But I get on Twitter quite a bit, and people were tagging us all over the place on this one and saying, maybe it's John Teeter.
John Teeter has returned, and he's flying his little time travel machine all over LA.
Maybe. I mean, he didn't ever mention a jetpack as far as I know, but you never know. So obviously people are like, what the fuck, a jetpack? Are we that far in the future? Are jetpacks already out? I feel like we're only a few years away from it, but they're definitely not.
Oh, they're here already. They're just not, you know, affordable
really?
for everybody.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't even know
People
that.
have jetpacks for sure.
So
Absolutely.
who has a jetpack? Can you just own one?
Yeah, you could. There's private companies.
So can
if you have
Elon
enough
Musk
money.
like jetpack around? Like, could he go get
if
a
he
coffee
wanted
on his
to?
jetpack?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
I mean, there's single man helicopters. There's like all sorts of flying
I know, but
contraptions.
jetpack,
Yeah,
like
jetpack.
a backpack with fuel in it that makes you fly.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
exists.
Yeah, you haven't seen the guy who has the jetpack? He can like fly around.
I've seen that with like water and like smoke or something.
Yeah,
I've never
there's-
seen like
Oh, really?
fire like and flying through the sky. Normally they're connected to like a rope or something.
No, there's definitely people that have jetpacks. So this could be. I wonder if we even know who this guy
sus.
is. Sounds like I'm sus. Sounds like they don't even know who this individual is yet. He's
they
still
don't.
unidentified. So
He's been spotted twice now.
didn't he come really close to an airplane? That's like why the FAA is all upset
Yeah.
is because he's flying too close to airspace near LAX
Yeah, he got like what
30 yards.
30 yards away
from an aircraft.
Yeah, apparently the second time. I guess the first time was back in September, and he was like 7 miles away from the aircraft or from the airport. But then I think this recent time he was only 30 yards away from an aircraft.
What the hell? What's wrong with him?
And he was spotted by 2 different ones. So, you know, that kind of, you know, strengthens this story, I guess, is 10 minutes later he was spotted by another airplane, which is
I wonder
kinda
how
weird.
high in the sky they're seeing.
3,000 feet.
Oh, 3,000.
That's pretty high.
And then this
Yeah,
first
holy
time was 6,000, I think. Or one time it was 6, one time it was 3. But yeah, I mean, that's still pretty high.
That is.
That's like that's a lot of thousands of feet to be up on a little jetpack.
Yeah, I feel
flying
like
around
that
where
could-
planes fly. Like, what if he gets smacked?
Yeah, or he like freaks out a pilot and they crash.
Right.
Or something. Or I feel like a billion things could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very concerning. I mean, obviously the FAA is concerned. They got the FBI talking to them about this, trying to figure out who this guy is. Just like, I think people are just will do anything for some attention these days.
Really?
And I think it's probably
Yeah.
just somebody who's like, let's see if I can get on, headlines. And,
Well, if he really wants to get attention, he should just go like down in Hollywood Boulevard.
but he
fly
doesn't want to
around.
get caught either, too.
Yeah, but if you're flying, go fly away and land somewhere and no one ever knows. Maybe he built it in his own house. Like, what if it's like a homemade jetpack
That'd be
that
badass.
he's flying around LA on?
I'd be
Honestly,
impressed.
Props.
Pretty impressive, right?
Props.
Or it's a time traveler with future technology that is flying through our skies.
It's
or
some
it's an alien.
anti-gravity craft they've created that he can like,
Maybe.
he disappears into another
Maybe it's an
dimension
alien.
and then
Why would an alien be
lands.
hanging around LAX though? They're like
Yeah.
so interested in our shitty old airplanes. Like, wow, look at these fucking ancient birds these guys are
Maybe
flying
they're trying
in.
to catch a celeb. They're like fans of the
A
celebrities.
celebrity.
Yeah, maybe.
I bet this guy's hoping to like get a picture of like some passenger out the window, like, he's like peeking through, like, "Hey, what up?"
Like flying next to the plane.
yeah.
There's a colonial woman turning butter on the
I
wing.
was gonna say, like in the movie.
Who knows? Maybe that's what he's trying to do.
Oh my god!
I mean,
maybe,
people do
maybe.
insane shit like, David Blaine with the balloons and going up, people are always trying to like push the envelope when it comes to
Or it's an
heights.
alien, or it's a time traveler, or it's a secret spy.
possible. I hope it's an alien. If it's an alien, it's about time.
It's about time
It's
they
about
come in
time
on
they
jetpacks.
arrived, honestly.
Yeah, it is.
You don't want to hear something. Speaking of aliens, this is just a curious thing I came across regarding Dr. Greer, who we've talked about a lot, ufologist, spiritual leader kind of, and a whole movement. But he's out in the desert right now doing one of his CE5s, and apparently Demi Lovato is with him.
What? Demi Lovato's out in the des?
Yeah, I was watching his live stream yesterday, and he said Demi Lovato is going to be on in our CE5 because apparently there's another.
That's badass, Demi.
Yeah,
I knew I liked
Demi.
her.
Hell
Demi
yeah.
Lovato and Steve-O actually were.
Steve-O too?
Steve-O was talking about his new film CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. On YouTube, like there's a YouTube clip of them that went really viral. So I guess Dr. Greer reached out to them, to Demi Lovato, and asked them if they want to come on a CE5 with him. So Demi Lovato is going to be on a
That's
CE5
so cool,
with him.
honestly.
Damn, we
She's all
wanted to
into
do that.
the
We were
whole-
hoping we might get a chance to do that. They're taking
where's our
Demi
invite?
Lovato out
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
We
Well,
don't
now
got
we're-
any chance now.
Now we're screwed.
You better become a pop star quick.
Yeah.
Oh, I could sing.
Let's put some singles out.
Okay.
Hey, everybody thinks I sing the intro song anyway. So
Oh my god.
That is true. The amount of people that say that to us, it's insane.
hilarious.
It's every day. Someone says that Josh sings the song. But you know what? The other day, someone said that I sing the little hamster voice in the background. It's like, hey.
that's exactly what it is, actually.
We
jumped
recorded in the studio and
in the
everything.
studio. You know, we put the
We worked with an artist. No, I'm
Yep.
just kidding. That's
Yep.
a real song, actually. What is the name of that song?
mod step
Mod Step. It's a copyright free
or mode step. Sorry,
Mode Step.
mod step.
It's always linked below because a lot of people are like, what is this song? It's so good. All of our songs are always linked, guys. If you want to go jam out.
Yes.
And
jam
listen to
the
me
higher
sing.
song. But anyway, what else do
So,
we got?
Oh,
for
this
stories?
is a sad
Oh
story.
yeah,
Oh
we're
my
about
God.
to take it
About to
down like
bring it
10
back down.
notches.
Oh, it's good preparation for the case today.
That's true. That's
You gotta
true.
bring it back
It's
down
gonna
a few.
get pretty dark for the rest of the episode, guys.
Unfortunately,
So this one has been going on for a while now. This actually happened last summer. And I remember hearing about it at the time and hearing that there might be charges pressed, but I didn't even know. I never heard what ended up happening. Did we cover it on the show? I feel like we may have covered it on the show.
no, we never covered
Maybe
this one.
covered a similar one. But
Yeah.
anyway, so back in July of 2019, a man named Sam Aneo was playing with his granddaughter, 18-month-old Chloe Wygand. And it was near an open window on the 11th floor of a cruise ship that was docked in Puerto Rico. And this is a Royal Caribbean boat.
Yeah.
And it was in the kids' room. He was just kind of holding her up near the glass. And he said that the reason that he did this was because, you know, when you bring your kids to like an aquarium or an exhibit or somewhere with glass, they like to like put their hands on it, or even just a window. Like kids love to do that and like, you know,
Bang
kind
on
of
the
push out,
glass,
bang
huh?
on the glass. Yeah. So he lifted her up to do that. And this is in the kids' room. And the problem is he was colorblind and he is colorblind and he didn't realize that the window was actually open. And so when he put her up there, she ended up falling out.
Fell out of his hands. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Terrible.
Just slipped out. Like
Yeah.
she moved and just slipped right out of his hands. Like,
Complete accident. Like he just didn't know that the barrier wasn't there. And it's kind of like, what the hell? On an 11th floor in a kid's room, why would there be open windows? That's so bizarre. But he even described watching her like fall, and you know, he is going to forever have that memory ingrained in his head.
Well, he had no idea that the glass was tinted.
No.
It was tinted. That's why he couldn't see if it was open. And there's no warnings apparently on the windows that it does open.
Which is ridiculous. If there's a cruise ship that has a window that's even slightly, you know, able to open enough for a kid to fall out, and it's in the
Yeah.
kid space, you need to have warnings all over the place,
Right.
or just not have windows that open in a kid space.
Yeah, especially in a kid's place. I don't know why there would be opening windows. There's no reason. You know,
really
these
not.
boats are nice. They're air conditioning. Why?
Right.
Why do you need to open them in a kid's space? That just does not make any sense. So it's incredibly tragic story.
Yeah. She fell 150 feet to the dock because it was docked at the time.
Yeah. Terrible. Just really, really sad. So the recent update and the reason that we're talking about this is because there have been charges pressed, which he has been charged with neglectful homicide. And he initially pleaded not guilty, but then they worked with him. They needed someone to take responsibility for this little girl's death. But he didn't take an actual Alfred plea, But it's pretty much the same thing if you've ever heard of that, like saying that he's guilty, but there's not going to be a punishment for him. I mean, it was a clear accident. The punishment is he lost his granddaughter and he's going to be traumatized for the rest of his life.
Oh my God.
So, but they, just for court reasons had to.
Yeah.
But the real reason we wanted to bring it up is just about the responsibility of the cruise line. Like, don't you think that they should have some responsibility here because the window was open and there was no warning?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of people are colorblind as well. So it's, if you have windows like that open to potentially 150-foot drop, there should be some sort of warning there. If a child can go through it, that just seems like a no-brainer to me. Like, why would they even allow that to happen? So absolutely. I think that they'll probably win this lawsuit, honestly, because I think they have a really strong case here because this should have just never happened.
Yeah, we didn't mention that. They did end up suing them, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll see where that goes. But I absolutely think they should be held responsible. And hopefully in the future, they'll design, especially windows in kids' areas, a little better. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is.
I don't understand why you need windows open on a cruise ship at all. There's decks. There's plenty of places to go get air. I don't see. It's so dangerous.
I could maybe see if it was like the adult spa or something.
Yeah, or like a restaurant for adults only.
Exactly.
Or something.
And it had like very clear like caution, windows open. Yeah. Or like caution, don't fall. I don't know. It's just
you think they'd cover their bases with that, especially in the kids area. Exactly. What the hell? And this isn't some old thing. It's last year.
And I'm sure this isn't the first time that something like this has happened, right? Like cruises can be dangerous, especially when you're not paying attention and you have kids. Like things can go wrong. I just feel like this is such a stupid mistake that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I completely agree. It definitely shouldn't have happened. And hopefully it never happens again.
I wonder if Sam's going to face any consequences at all. Like, is he going to get fined or anything?
He's going back to court in December for his sentencing, but I'm sure it might be like community service. I mean, who knows? It could be.
They're not going to punish this.
They got to give
man.
him something.
Poor guy.
They're going to give him something.
Maybe.
They wouldn't be doing negligent homicide. They can't. I don't even think they can give him negligent homicide charges if there's no punishment. Like, I think he's going to avoid jail, but I think there'll probably be a fine or some. There's going to be some type of consequence to it.
Maybe. I mean, why would they want to like hurt their family more though? God, what a tragedy. Really, really sad story.
Yeah, let us know what you guys think about that one though. But before we get into our case on the Dardeen family, we'd like to thank our first sponsors for today.
You guys know that these days it feels like online shopping is really all we're doing, especially in 2020. And that's where today's sponsor, Honey, comes in. It's a free browser extension that scours the internet for promo codes and then automatically applies the best one available at checkout. Honey is basically your online shopping best friend. So here's how it works. You get Honey on your computer for free in 2 easy clicks by going to joinhoney.com/milehigher. Then when you're checking out on one of its over 30,000 supported sites, Honey pops up and all you have to do is click apply coupons. Then you wait a few seconds while Honey searches for coupons for that website. And if they find a working code, it applies the best one, the one that's going to save you the most money on your cart. Recently, I was shopping for some jeans for the fall, and Honey's helped me save about $30. Honey has found its over 17 million members over $2 billion in savings. Honey supports all types of retailers from tech to gaming sites to fashion brands, even food delivery. It's simple. If you have a computer, Honey should be on it. And you can get Honey for free today by going to joinhoney.com/milehigher. That's joinhoney.com/milehigher.
Here's a crazy statistic for you. Every 26 seconds, there's a break-in in this country. But with Simply Safe Home Security, you can protect your whole home around the clock. It's serious lasting protection, and all it takes is a simple 30-minute setup. You'll even get a free security camera when you protect your home today. More on that here in a second. But obviously, a security system is imperative for Kendall and I, and it's definitely something that we have put in place. And Simply Safe makes it extremely easy to do so. It literally only takes 30 minutes as long as you have a wireless connection. I gotta say, we feel much safer with a security system, and Simply Safe has an award-winning arsenal of sensors and security cameras that blankets every inch of your house. That way you'll always know that your home and your family is always safe. A technician nor a salesman ever has to step foot in your home. It's all do it yourself. It's all super easy. And once you get it set up, Simply Safe will monitor your home around the clock with security professionals who are there in case of an emergency to immediately send help to your home. Plus, unlike many security companies out there, there's no contract, no hidden fees, and no installation costs. It's why U.S. News and World Report named SimpliSafe Best Overall Home Security of 2020. So right now, secure your home and visit simplysafe.com/milehigher and get a free security camera, plus a 60-day risk-free trial with any new system order. There's literally nothing to lose, guys. Go to simplysafe.com/milehigher, simplysafe.com/milehigher.
Okay, so the Dardeen family. This case takes place in the mid-1980s in Ina, Illinois, in a small rural community in the southernmost village in Jefferson County. At the start of the decade, the population was only 460 people, and by 1990, it was only 489.
That is such a small town.
That is. I really cannot imagine that life.
I lived in a small town for 8 years, and we had like 5,000 or 6,000 people. And I felt like that was a tiny ass little town.
I thought it was like 500, honestly. It felt so small.
No, 500 is literally a town that only has a few spots that are like open for shopping. Like, and a gas station, a grocery store, a bank, post office,
the
firehouse.
gossip, the rumors that go around in a small town like
I mean,
that.
everybody knows everybody. Even in a 5,000 person town, everybody knows everybody.
I can't even imagine going to a school with that few people.
Yeah, their school was probably
Wild.
like 20 people.
God, Ina, Illinois, man.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's honestly wild. My school was like 5 times as large, just my freaking high school as their whole city.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's insane.
Yeah, you went to school at a city.
Yeah, pretty
Honestly,
much.
your high school, though, is like the biggest
small
in the
city.
state, and it's like a small country, to be real.
It is.
Anyway, so it had a general store, it had a bank, a post office, a firehouse, a gas station, but that was about it. And in 1986, Russell Keith Dardeen and Ruby Elaine Dardeen moved to Ina with their 2-year-old son, Peter. Both preferred to go by their middle names, Keith and Elaine.
So yeah, we'll be referencing them by those names going forward.
They're moving from Mount Carmel, Illinois, which is Keith's hometown, and that's about 80 miles away from Ina. Elaine was originally from Albion, Illinois, which is very close to Mount Carmel. Keith was 29 years old, Elaine was 30, and Keith was trained to work as a plant operator at the Rend Lake Water Conservancy District Treatment Plant in nearby Benton. Once he was done training, the couple bought a beige and white mobile home, and they rented land just off of Illinois Route 37, a main highway. And across from the highway were the Illinois Central Railroad tracks used by the Union Pacific Railroad.
So yeah, I mean, this is like a very typical tiny town in America where you've got, major modes of transportation, you've got the, railroad, and you also have a major highway. So this is a very transient area. There's people probably just kind of stop, fill up their gas tank and drive right through. There's not much of a, civilization happening here. It's very, very simple, very, very small. So it's just kind of a, passing through type of place.
Their landlords, Lloyd and Joanne Settle, lived on farmland next to their mobile home. Elaine found a job working at Staples, the office supply store in Mount Vernon, which is 15 miles north of Ina. And the family belonged to church. They were really, really into their religion. They belonged to a small Baptist church and were very active in the church band. Keith was the lead vocalist, and Elaine played the piano, and everyone in the congregation was really fond of them.
Yeah, everybody loved them. They said they were like the nicest people.
They were modest, and they were really devoted to their faith, like we said, and to their son. They worked hard to save as much money as they could for Peter's college fund, even though he was only a toddler.
So to me, I don't know, this kind of struck me as a little weird. Because I mean, they're definitely don't have a lot of money, but the fact that they're like so concerned about Peter's college fund, he's 2 years old, is just I don't know, maybe it's just the times, and that's kind of what
I don't think that's weird. My college fund was started when I was born.
Oh, I had no college fund, so maybe that's why I'm biased to this. But
I thought you had a college fund.
No, I didn't have a dime saved for my college.
You're right. Yeah,
so.
right.
I don't know, but I feel like some people out there understand what I'm saying, that it's a little weird if you're, barely paying all your bills and,
to worry about college if you're barely
to be
getting by.
like putting as much money as they were into the college fund. Like that was like priority number one versus like.
Well, they probably wanted to invest in their kids' future and make sure you get a better life than them. I don't think it's that weird.
Sure. Okay. That's
I don't know.
fine.
Maybe I'm missing something.
No,
Is that weird?
I don't know. I feel like it's a little weird if you're like tight on money, but you're like pouring your money into something that's going to happen and hopefully happen in 18 years. What if he's like, doesn't want to go?
I mean, are they pouring all of their money in? Are they not eating? So
No. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of making it sound like they're like their entire paychecks are going into his college account. Obviously, they lived and everything was fine.
Okay.
It's just interesting because Keith specifically would resell cheap cans of soda. Like he'd go buy like Kroger soda and then go to the water treatment plant and then resell it for 50 cents. And he took all the profits from his Coke selling business into Peter's college fund. So
maybe because he loved his son. Damn, that's the hate.
I'm not hating.
I don't get it.
I'm not hating on him. I'm just.
Well, maybe the kid was like, Daddy, can I have a new pair of socks? Like, no, son, this is for college only. You don't get shit till college.
I don't understand.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's a little odd that he was so focused on the college fund when your child is 2. Like, I understand like putting a little bit in there, but he's 2 years old.
Wait till you have a kid, and I think you'll think differently.
All right, that's fair enough. Fair enough. I accept that.
So when Elaine found out that she was pregnant again, they were even more focused on saving because now they had 2 kids that were going to be
2 college funds.
Yeah, 2 college funds.
Trying to go to like Notre Dame or an Ivy League school.
Maybe
like,
he's like, my kid will be smart. A lot of people are like that. They like are obsessed
Sure.
with making sure their kids are successful and have a better life than them.
That's fine.
I think it's pretty normal.
Okay.
Keith was always very protective of his family. He made sure that their doors were locked and he never let strangers into their home.
This is something that has been talked about by the family themselves. Like they have given us these details that he was very much worried about. Obviously, I think coming into Ina, he had some idea that with a town like this, there's going to be some element of crime there. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, there definitely was a lot of crime in this small town for what it was. And so they were definitely very concerned about that from the beginning, and they made a rule like do not ever answer the door, pretty much, like, and definitely don't let anybody you don't know into our home. It's interesting. I mean, they're definitely very cautious about this. Keith told his mother Joanne Dardeen that he wanted to move back to Mount Carmel where she lived, and Keith's parents were divorced, but his father Don Dardeen still lived in Mount Carmel as well. I mean, that's his hometown, so I think he realized very quickly in Ina that, okay, I'm having another child. I'm now going to have 2 children. So I don't know if I want my kids growing up in this little town. So he was starting to make plans to go back to Mount Carmel, which is very important. Keith also told his mother that he regretted moving to Ina and that even if he couldn't find a job in Mount Carmel, he still felt like it was the best place for his family to be, and he would move them back anyway. And Joanne thought this was strange because Keith and Elaine were so focused on saving money, the college fund, and all of that. So a little bit weird. But Keith told her that he just didn't feel that his family was safe in Ina. And he didn't explain exactly why he felt this way. And if there was a specific threat he was worried about, he wasn't saying anything about it to anybody else. So it is a little interesting because I think there is definitely something that happened after they moved to Ina that really triggered this with him. And he became very much concerned with the safety of his family and wanting to move back to Carmel. Like this is a very strong feeling that he had. Plus moving made sense for the Dardeen family because obviously a mobile home, not a lot of room, and a lot of families do live in mobile homes, but for them, they were all sharing one bed and they wanted to be able to provide enough room so that their kids could have their own beds. And so they thought, we've got to move to a bigger place anyway. So why not, move back to Mount Carmel? Let's talk a little bit about the crimes in Jefferson County where Ina, Illinois is. So obviously with a kid on the way, a pregnant wife, Keith was definitely feeling very uneasy about the area that they were living in. And recently there had been a significant increase in rapes and murders in Jefferson County. Over the past 2 years, there were 15 murders in the county, including the rape and murder of a 10-year-old girl. And this attack happened nearby in May of 1987, not long after Keith and Elaine moved to Ina. So honestly, that would concern me too. I mean, a girl just got brutally murdered, a 10-year-old girl. You're about to have kids, growing up there. That's very, very concerning. And just to put things into perspective, Jefferson County had just 38,577 residents in 1985. So 15 murders in that population is not great. The town of Ina also had a very gruesome historical crime history there. There was actually a murder in 1924 that was absolutely brutal. So in 1924, there was the Sweeten family, which was Elsie and Jack Sweeten, and they had been married for 16 years, and they had 3 young boys. The couple was friends with Reverend Lawrence Height and his wife Anna, and they had been married for 26 years, and they had 2 daughters and 1 son. In July, Jack Sweeten became very ill, and he was diagnosed with food poisoning at the time called ptomaine poisoning. Lawrence was at his bedside as Jack died. Lawrence conducted Jack's memorial service actually and was seen by a neighbor comforting Elsie. Rumors spread about the Reverend and the beautiful young widow soon after. And a few months later in September, Lawrence's wife, Anna, was diagnosed with food poisoning, and she also died. So very strange. People don't normally die from food poisoning. I mean, it does happen, but it's very, very rare.
Very.
So to have two people die of food poisoning so close together is very suspicious. So the Jefferson County coroner ordered an investigation into this, and a lab report confirmed that Anna had died of arsenic poisoning, and arsenic was found in their home, which Lawrence said was used to kill rats. He ended up being arrested and charged with murder soon after this, and with rumors of an affair, authorities ordered that Jack's body be exhumed and tested, and they also found that Jack died of arsenic poisoning as well. Lawrence and Elsie initially denied the murder, saying they had nothing to do with it, as well as their affair, but they eventually confessed to poisoning their spouses. Both of them were found guilty and sent to prison, but Elsie was later acquitted, and this was one of the most famous cases in Ina, Illinois. There was also some very infamous homicides that happened in the 1980s as well, which were actually solved. In one case from 1985, Tom Odell brutally murdered his entire family while taking LSD. He stabbed his father with a butcher knife in their Mount Vernon home and then waited for his mother to get home and stabbed her to death too. As his three siblings returned home, he stabbed two and strangled one. So there's been multiple cases of families being murdered in Jefferson County in kind of the around the same time, not exactly, but over the years, there's definitely been other really brutal murders that have happened.
So it didn't take long for Keith to decide that they needed to leave Ina, and they decided to put their mobile home up for sale. And Keith became increasingly paranoid about his family's safety, which is kind of interesting. I feel like he really did have a feeling.
There was definitely paranoia there. Like, yeah. I think he almost felt like something might happen to them.
And like something, maybe he was afraid of someone specifically.
Yeah, to kind of rush putting your home up for sale. Like, we got to move now. Like, he was thinking, we got to get out of here now.
Right.
There's clearly some type of threat.
So one night, a young woman knocked on their door and asked to use their phone. And Keith refused to even let her inside and turned her away. That's how paranoid he was. Keith's friends and family knew how cautious he was of strangers, and they all knew that the family was planning to move because of this. By the fall of 1987, Elaine was about 7.5 months pregnant, and Peter was 3 years old. Keith and Elaine already picked out baby names, Casey for a girl and Ian for a boy. On November 17th to the 18th, Keith was scheduled for an overnight shift at the water treatment plant, but he never showed up. And this was really unlike him. He would always call if he was sick or if something happened, and his supervisor immediately was worried and called his home. No one answered, though. He continued to call throughout the day with no answer, not from Elaine, not from anyone. So this is when his supervisor decided to call his parents in Mount Carmel, and neither of them had heard from their son or their daughter-in-law and couldn't think of any reason why Keith wouldn't show up for work. That evening, Don Dardeen, Keith's father, decided to call the local sheriff's department. They agreed to meet him outside the mobile home and that they would use Don's spare key if they weren't home, and no one was answering.
So basically just doing a welfare check, because obviously it's a little weird. They just want to make sure, everything's okay.
A police officer met Don at the mobile home at 6:30. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. They walked around the trailer to the back door, and they used a flashlight to look inside. The police officer saw people under blankets in the family bed, but when he knocked, they didn't move. He turned the knob, and the door was open, and inside he was shocked by what he found. Tucked neatly under the covers were the dead bodies of Elaine, Peter, and a tiny infant. Elaine had been gagged and bound with duct tape and may have been initially bound to a chair. Peter was also found bound and gagged. They had been beaten severely with a baseball bat that Keith had bought for Peter for his birthday that year. Elaine and Peter were bludgeoned in the face, in the head, and they both had fractured skulls. And what's so sad is Elaine was well into her 3rd trimester during the attack, and she had actually gone into spontaneous labor because she was beaten so badly.
That's horrific.
I know.
God.
And investigators actually aren't completely sure if it's because of the physical beating or it could have just been the shock of watching her young son be bludgeoned to death. I can't even.
Yeah. Either one is horrible. I mean,
and that does happen. It can send your body into shock basically, and you'll just go into labor.
Oh, man.
So sad.
Whoever did this, just no soul. Like, what's wrong with you?
So she did give birth to this baby girl, but they have no idea if she was even alive during the delivery. It could have just naturally happened. But once the baby was out, the killer used the baseball bat to murder the infant as well. Just fucking terrible. And all 3 members of the family died of blunt force trauma.
So, yeah, I mean, let's think about this for a second, just what's going on, at this scene. So we've got 3 people that are dead in bed. They've been tucked in. So they were clearly not beaten under the covers, most likely. Like they were outside of the bed, then they were put in the bed. Why? It's very weird.
So creepy.
I mean, to me, this is very, very personal. Whoever did this liked to be very personal with the victims. Either maybe knew them even, or just really sick individual that enjoyed doing this.
And when we get into more of the detail a little more, you'll see more reasons why we think that.
And the fact that they were carefully positioned to look like they were sleeping is very weird too. Like they almost were doing that to what? To maybe knowing the police were going to come to the house and do exactly what they did and hoping that they just see them sleeping and they'd go away. I don't know.
Or that's just some weird sick thing they did. I mean, sometimes killers just do things and there's really no explaining why.
Yeah, it's very weird. And I mean, I think part of it has to do with the fact the killer did try to clean up the crime scene as far as the blood goes, but eventually gave up because there was obviously still blood spatter everywhere, blood pools everywhere from the brutal murders that had just taken place. There was also no signs of forced entry, and Elaine had not been raped. So these are 2 huge clues here. To me, some people point, is this a robbery, gone wrong or something like that, or a sexual attack by somebody? And she was not raped as far as we know. And the door was just open, like as if somebody had come to the door and they had let them in, most likely.
So that's kind of weird because we know that Keith doesn't let strangers into the house. So that makes me think that maybe it was someone that he knew.
Mm-hmm. I think that there's a strong possibility that it was somebody that they knew.
And that he felt comfortable enough to let them in.
Well, there's no Keith. That's the thing, is in the bed, there's no Keith. Based on the fact that there was no signs of forced entry, the police were quickly able to rule out a robbery because usually there's forced entry in a robbery. And also they were able to see that clearly through the windows that there was still jewelry, a video camera, VCR, and some money that would have all been taken if this was a robbery. I mean, nobody robs, breaks into a house, doesn't take anything.
No, especially if you're going to kill the whole family. You're probably going to take everything you can. That's a huge risk.
But it's interesting that the killer did take the time to try and clean up the blood because that shows they weren't in a rush to flee. Like they weren't just boom, 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 and then they would leave. Like they really knew that they were, nobody was going to come looking. Like somebody that clearly knew them is what I think.
I think so too.
Based on all this information the police found at the scene. So also, like I said, Keith was nowhere to be found, and the family's car, a 1981 red Plymouth, was gone as well, which is like a little hatchback vehicle. Keith also had a truck, but that was at the house parked still, so completely normal there. But the fact that their red Plymouth was gone made police think, okay, Keith must have committed these murders, then hopped in the Plymouth and taken off. So he was suspect number 1. And I mean, in a lot of these family killings, it's, they usually look at one of the family members first. I mean, usually husband who did it. Look at the Chris Watts case. So, that's usually where investigators go first, is they got to look at the husband or father in the case.
And he's gone. So it kind of looks obvious.
He's missing.
Almost.
So where the hell did he go? Clearly he's running from this. So the police basically, put out a call looking for this Plymouth vehicle. They start putting roadblocks up to try and attempt to pull Keith over if he's out driving the family vehicle. Police officers were dispatched to Mount Carmel to go talk to Keith's family as well as Keith's sister, Anita Dardeen Knapp. And she remembered hearing the police tell her that your brother has done this. Where is he? So clearly jumping to conclusions right away. And I mean, it's a very small area. Obviously, a lot of police officers probably didn't have a ton of experience with this. So and based on experience as well, they did, have some family murders. So they're like, okay, this is another one of those.
It did seem kind of obvious.
It did.
Man kills his family and leaves. That's what it kind of looks like.
But early the next day, the family's car was found covered in blood and parked outside a bank and police station in Benton, Illinois, about 10 miles from the mobile home. What was really weird about this, though, is that even though they found the Dardeen family's car, there was still no signs of Keith. And there was blood all over the inside of the family car, like I said. So where the fuck is Keith? Like, this makes no sense whatsoever. So investigators are looking all over the place, trying to find Keith. And within 24 hours after the bodies of Elaine, Peter, and the baby were found, a group of hunters were just passing through a wheat field fairly close to the Dardeen home when they came across a body. And this body that they found was Keith's. And it was found about 1 mile from the mobile home, just over the Franklin County line, and about 11 miles from where the car was found in the nearby town of Benton. And Keith was definitely not found in good condition whatsoever. He had been shot 3 times in the front of his skull, in the right side of his face, and through his left cheek. So he wasn't beaten with the baseball bat, he was shot. The killer had also castrated him. That makes me squirm sitting in my chair right now.
Oh, me too.
And there's apparently a local rumor that after cutting off his penis, this killer put it inside his mouth.
Oh,
the ultimate defilement. Like, it's...
Yeah. Well, that tells us, if that is true, this is 100% a personal case.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is some significance to this. I really do. And I don't know exactly how it's, what it points to, but I think it's definitely very personal.
I mean, it's definitely not a robbery.
No.
You know that? Who would take someone out of the house and...
drive them
the fact that they took one person out of the house and gave them a completely different treatment than the rest of the family and were bold enough to cut their genital off.
That's such a personal attack.
Such a personal
attack. That's like the lowest of, that's so embarrassing for that person. Like, oh.
Mm-hmm. And it shows how much anger to want to do that to someone. So yeah, I think there is something personal going on. I mean, what we're coming up with here is this is someone that he knows probably because they came in, he let them into the house.
No forced entry.
Would not have done that if it was a stranger.
Right.
And then just, how personal it was. The fact that he was separated from his family and his injuries were so much worse. It seems like someone went after him specifically and the family were kind of casualties to that.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think that the main target was Keith. And they were just so filled with hate and rage that they decided to kill his family as well. I mean...
Yeah. And of course, that's just our theory. We don't know. This is one of those cases where they just have no idea, really. No. It could have been anything.
No, I mean, they don't even really know exactly how this unfolded, really. They don't know who was killed first.
No.
They don't know if the family, Elaine and the kids were killed first or if Keith was killed first. But it seems like, I think the leading idea is that Keith was killed first and they went back to the house.
Oh, really?
And
I would have thought it'd be the opposite. That the killer would maybe want to, if it is something personal about against Keith, maybe they wanted to hurt them as much as possible and kill his family in front of him and then take him off and take him elsewhere.
That's kind of how I feel too. Yeah. There's a lot of people out there that think that he was first and family was second. But I think you're right that I think he probably watched them and then he ended up leaving with this person. And then he dropped him and, they believe they killed him in the car. He was murdered inside the red Plymouth because of the blood spatter everywhere. I mean, it was way too bloody for nothing to not happen in there. So they believe he was murdered in the vehicle, dropped in the field, and then they drove the vehicle to Benton where they left it for police to find. And then just whoever was in it disappeared.
But even going through all of that, it just kind of proves that this was premeditated and definitely planned out and a emotional personal attack because that's a lot of work. That's a lot of moving pieces. It's not like you just went into someone's house and blew killed them all and then left. This is very calculated and there's different pieces and I feel like they purposely did all this to confuse investigators. I feel like there was definitely some planning.
And it doesn't seem like it was just a random attack either. I mean, it had to be personal against his family. Again, we're just speculating. Yeah. There's a possibility that it was just some random psycho that picked their house one night and targeted them, but it just doesn't really look like that.
It seems like this person might have had experience in killing.
Maybe. Or they just had enough anger that anyone can
but
get,
I feel like... So
you have to have experience.
I think when you look at the whole picture here, so not only was the car dropped in another town, which is... I feel like a little bit beyond a normal scope of just somebody who gets to a point where they just decide to kill somebody and, they've never done something like this before. This is very methodical and planned out, like Janelle was saying. And, the area in Benton where they dropped the vehicle, there's tons of restaurants, gas stations, places to hide, getaway cars could be stashed somewhere. They knew that they could, if they get to this other town, they could disappear and just be gone. And that's exactly what happened. And the fact that they didn't leave any evidence in the vehicle that could somehow tie them back to, whoever this killer was is kind of impressive too.
Yeah,
when you're thinking about how personal of attack this was, and, not only did they probably clean themselves off at the Dardeen home before leaving, because it's Keith's blood in the Plymouth. So, after taking a baseball bat there's going to be all sorts of stuff all over the place. So how did that not make it into the vehicle? How did, I guess we don't know for sure how this person was I believe this person was very, very skilled in committing murders, because they tried to clean up the scene. They did a pretty good job. Obviously there's still signs of the killing that happened, but the fact they took the time to do that, they knew they had to cover it up. They can't just leave bloody DNA everywhere. They knew
what to clean up.
Right. And then they took Keith and were able to do all of this almost flawlessly and then disappear and literally be no trace to them. Is harder than you think. It's harder than you think.
Well, maybe it's possible. And I am thinking about what people were saying, that he was killed first. Maybe he was killed first. Maybe he met someone outside somewhere in that field. Maybe they had an agreement. Maybe he owed someone money. Maybe
or there was more than one.
What do you mean?
More than one person worked in this.
Oh yeah, that's possible. But I'm saying there's a possibility that Keith left the house and went up and met with them in his final resting place.
Right.
Maybe they agreed to meet there, and then they went and killed the rest of his family. Now I see what people are saying, because that would explain the lack of the DNA in the car. But why would Keith's blood be in the car if he was murdered there and just left there? He was clearly transported. Or they met in the car. They're like, get in the car, talk in the car, kill in the car, get out of the car, drop That's
them
possible.
there. There's a lot of ways it could play out.
Shot first in the car and then they went and mutilated him.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Again, anything's possible with this one. There's not enough information.
Possibilities. No. And even after all 4 bodies were autopsied, they still didn't really have much more information. They didn't know which murder happened first. And all they could determine really was that they all likely died within an hour or two of each other, based on, probable time of death. That's all they could really gather from the autopsy. There's probably some more information there, I'm sure, but the autopsy reports aren't available. But what we do know is that Elaine, Peter, and Casey had been dead for about 12 hours when they were found, and Keith had been dead for about 24 to 36 hours when he was found. So he was definitely murdered within 12 hours of his whole family. But the details of the case were very confusing to investigators. It's kind of confusing us as well. And they had no idea why Keith was killed in a different spot. And like we were saying, maybe he was taken from the mobile home, or he was abducted while he was out already. And the killer may have left Elaine and Peter tied up while killing Keith and came back to kill them. Bottom line is that the police really had no idea what had happened here. And they were very confused by the MO of this killer. They couldn't figure out, what was the motive here, and why was Keith killed somewhere else, and why was the car invented? They really had no leads, no idea. And so, they had to start hoping they were going to get some more information.
Yeah, and their family members were just absolutely shocked. Think about this. This is a religious family, a young family just starting out their life. They're in the church band. They're liked by everyone. This is a huge shock. They're like, who the hell would want to do this to them? Especially that it's so personal. It looks personal. The family's like, who would have done this? Is this someone in Keith's life that we know? Is it someone in Keith's life that he's hidden from us?
Yeah.
That's a possibility.
Or is it some random passerby that just saw an opportunity and took it? They really had no idea. They still didn't even know if it was one or two or maybe more killers. They had no idea whatsoever.
News of this violent attack was spreading quickly through their small community, and people became, horrified by these gruesome details, hearing what happened, especially to the toddler and the newborn, how they were beaten to death, the rumors of Keith's genitals being found in his mouth. It's horrific stuff. And the fact that they didn't know who it was, and this is such a small town, it's kind of like, is it one of us?
Yeah. Or
it's
was
like a huge game of Among Us.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, it really is.
You're scared to go to sleep at night because you don't know who the person is. Is it someone that is part of the community? Is it someone that's part of the church and is secretly evil?
They have no idea. It's a complete mystery. Yeah. Complete mystery. Or some people even speculated that there is some connection to the past crimes that I had mentioned earlier. Like there was a serial killer out there and, they were returning to kill another family. Like maybe that's their thing, to murder families.
That's what I was going to say. Is there any other patterns in this area that we know of where people have been killed in similar ways, where the man was separated from the family?
No, not specifically. There wasn't any specific case that was like the exact same thing.
And normally there will be some.
Yeah. Yeah. Other than there was children being killed. I mean, that's one thing. There was multiple children killed.
In this town?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of interesting because there is only 400 something people there. So what are the chances that there's multiple murderers?
Right. So maybe there is some pattern there. Maybe there is room for a possibility of a serial killer. And I think it's something that you got to consider with this case.
Yeah. So people, like we said, were really freaked out. And after the news broke, there was a huge spike in gun sales. Residents openly carried for protection. I mean, I don't blame them. And kids weren't allowed to go anywhere alone. No one was letting strangers into their home. High school kids who usually waited outside for, sports games and stuff were forced to wait inside until their parents came to pick them up.
Yeah, because this is scary, man. Like, you don't know who's out there or who could be next. Like,
exactly. There was also a huge rise of sales of security system. The entire community was clearly on edge and had kind of collective PTSD from the experience. A local TV news station, WISL-ABC in Harrisburg, offered $10,000 in reward money for information leading to an arrest. And the Dardeen family added an additional $10,000 on top of that, bringing the total to $20,000. Eventually, it was raised to $30,000 or $68,640 in today's money. The police investigated every tip that they could. Over 30 officers worked on the case full time and interviewed over 100 people. And even with that reward money and, a few tips coming in, nothing led to anything solid. There was no real leads and they still had no idea. They were all left to speculate.
Before we talk about Keith a little bit more and some of the possible suspects in this case, I want to thank our last sponsors for today.
So we all know that getting into a routine can be hard. It can be hard to remember to take your vitamins, and it can be hard to know what vitamins to take. And that's where Care of comes in. All of Care of's products are formulated with good for you, clean ingredients that are backed by science. Care of is super transparent about research and the sourcing behind all of their products. And if you don't know where to start with vitamins, Care of has a 5-minute online quiz that asks you questions about your lifestyle and your health and other concerns that you have and specifically addresses those goals. It's basically like getting a one-on-one consultation with a nutritionist, all without leaving your house. And as the seasons change, it's important to get ahead of taking care of your immune health. Did you know it takes about 30 days for your body to adapt to new nutrients? So now is a great time to update your vitamin routine. Care of products go beyond vitamins and supplements and include protein powders and boosts to help you supplement your workouts as you move indoors in the colder months. I just love how easy it is. They come in little packs and you just open your pack for the day. It says, "Hello, Kendall" on mine. It'll say your name on yours. And you can take them all at once. It takes the sorting and the thinking out of your vitamin routine, which I love. So check it out and you can get 50% off your first order at Care of at takecareof.com and enter code MileHigher50. Again, that's a whopping 50% off your first Care of order at takecareof.com and enter promo code MileHigher50.
If you haven't seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix yet, then go watch it after this episode. Because in this documentary, there's a bunch of tech insiders from some of the biggest tech companies in the world, and they explain how social media is engineered to exploit users' data for profit. And they call this surveillance capitalism. Look, I'm cool with normal capitalism where I'm a willing participant in the transaction. Like every time I go to the grocery store to buy food, I'm agreeing to that transaction. But when my personal data is being harvested to tech billionaires so they can get even richer, that's where I draw the line. And that's why, more than ever, I have made sure that I am putting an extra layer of protection around my data online with ExpressVPN. Because every time you use the internet, big tech companies mine your data by tracking your searches, messages, and video history. But when you run ExpressVPN on your device, it hides your IP address, which websites can use to personally identify you. That makes your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. Obviously, you still need to be careful about what you share on social media, but ExpressVPN can make your web browsing more anonymous. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your internet data to keep you safe from hackers and prying eyes, which is super important if you're ever using public Wi-Fi in a hotel or in a coffee shop or restaurant or something, you are exposed unless you are using a VPN tunnel. Many VPNs out there slow your internet down, but not ExpressVPN. It's incredibly fast and easy to use. So if you're like me and you don't like the idea of big tech companies exploiting your personal information, then visit expressvpn.com/milehigher right now and you can get 3 extra months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/milehigher to protect your data. Go to expressvpn.com/milehigher to learn more. So with no leads in this case at all, the police had to consider all potential suspects. And they talked to one neighbor of Keith and Elaine's, and they had actually said that Keith and Elaine were raising Labrador retrievers and that they had seen a strange man coming and going from their mobile home more than once. And they're not sure if this was different men or if this was the same guy every time, but they did know that they were, selling dogs. And so there was going to be people who they potentially didn't know coming to the house. And apparently this neighbor actually asked Elaine who this particular person was that was coming to the home. And she said it was a friend of Keith's and then changed the subject. So a lot of people think that this particular person may even have been the killer, or maybe it was just one of Keith's friends. Robert Lewis, the Franklin County coroner, believed the community was overreacting though, because most of the previous murders have been solved. So he's like, oh, we'll solve this one too, no problem. And he considered the Dardeen family murders an isolated incident. He didn't believe there was any connection to past murders, and he did believe that the murderer was somebody the family knew personally, but he didn't believe that it was a serial killer. With that being said, let's talk about the 2 potential suspects the police had over the years. And these 2 individuals happen to be serial killers, which is very interesting considering this Franklin County coroner statement that he didn't believe it was a serial killer, because the only suspects the police really even seriously considered in these murders was serial killers, in fact.
Because it was probably just so brutal.
That goes back to what I'm saying. Like, this was somebody skilled did this. Like, somebody who's done this before, I feel like, did these murders.
Maybe.
Potentially.
And someone that it looks like someone that enjoys the experience of killing and really thinks it out.
Yeah, and killing in such a personal way like that.
But if it's a serial killer, then it's not personal.
Well, yeah, I mean, like up close is when I say personal. Like a lot of serial killers like to literally,
I see what you're saying,
make eye contact with their victims.
Mm-hmm.
So one of these individuals was named Angel Resendez, who was a serial killer suspected of killing up to 23 people, and he went by the alias Rafael Resendez Ramirez. Not Richard Ramirez. There's another Ramirez serial killer out there.
Yeah, he's creepy.
This guy was also known as the Railroad Killer because he traveled the country on freight trains, hopping off randomly at different towns to murder people before hopping back on the train and disappearing. He even sometimes hitched rides with truckers and went wherever they were going and committed murders along the way. And because he would just, commit a murder, then take off, they were impossible to trace. They were just all randomly spread out. So he's very difficult to track down. But the reason why police considered him a suspect is because many of his victims lived near train tracks, and the Dardeen family's home was right across from train tracks. And his preferred method of killing was beating people to death, just like in the Dardeen case. But Raphael ended up being arrested in 1999, and he ended up being, charged with these murders, but detectives were unable to find any sort of evidence linking him to the area or to the Dardeen murder specifically. The police haven't really released much information around this guy and its connection to the Dardeen case, so we don't even really know if this guy even had an alibi for the day of the murders in November. But another serial killer suspect was much more promising in this case, a man named Tommy Lynn Sells. So Tommy Lynn Sells, he actually left home at just 13 years old after he endured consistent sexual abuse throughout his childhood. He later claimed that by 14, he was addicted to killing. And Tommy Lynn Sells spent 2 decades wandering the United States working as a day laborer and mechanic for traveling carnivals. And as he traveled along, he murdered people randomly. Tommy ended up being caught after a brutal attack on 2 young girls. 10-year-old Crystal Searles was staying the night at her friend's house, 13-year-old Kayleen Harris. And this was on New Year's Eve 1999 in Del Rio, Texas. And this is really sad and very scary. But Kayleen was on the bottom bunk and Crystal was on the top bunk in the room. And Crystal woke up when she heard a noise and she saw a man standing in the room. Tommy had climbed through the window. Crystal watched as Tommy slashed Kayleen's throat and she fell to the floor. Tommy turned to leave, but at the last second, he spotted Crystal, and he calmly walked to the bunk bed and said, "Move your hands," before slashing her throat. Kayleen died, but Crystal survived, actually, and based on her description, the police created a composite sketch and were able to track Tommy down and arrest him. Tommy went on to confess to many murders that he committed, including the murder of the Dardeen family.
The first time I did a shot of dope, it was the best feeling I ever had in my life. And the first time I killed somebody, it was such a rush. And it was just like that shot of dope. Every time I did it, it was that rush again. And I started chasing that high.
When he did, he told police he confessed in order to ease the suffering of families, claiming that he found religion in God. But the more likely scenario is that he was just trying to buy himself more time, especially after he was found guilty and sentenced to death. He was just trying to stay alive longer. He was linked to at least 22 murders, but he confessed to about 70 of them. It's just crazy to me that there's people out there who are literally killing 70 people.
Yeah, what the hell?
It's just wild. And how many people who have unsolved cases out there that could be serial killer victims? That's really scary to think about too.
Yeah, that is.
After Tommy Linsells confessed to the Dardeen murders, obviously investigators are like, all right, we got our guy. You know, this is clearly makes sense. And, you know, they're like, we got our guy. Well, the problem with Tommy Linsells and, you know, with many killers out there who want to take responsibility for kills that they did not commit. And with Tommy, his story just kept on changing. So, for example, Tommy would talk about how he was 22 years old at the time the Dardeen family was killed. And in one version of his story, he met Keith at a truck stop outside Mount Vernon. And then in another story, they met at a pool hall. So that's a big, you know, difference there where you meet. I mean, can't really like get around that. Mm-hmm. That seems very odd that two different places are being reported by him. But apparently the two men hit it off. Keith invited Tommy back to his home for dinner, and he said that Keith and Elaine actually propositioned him to have a threesome with them.
Oh, spicy.
Which, to the family of Keith and Elaine, this is highly unlikely to impossible. Like, they were not the type of people that they knew that would do that.
Okay, well, yeah, maybe from what you thought, but people can have all types of weird sexual things going on behind the scenes that you'd have no idea about. You know, a lot of people don't openly talk about that because they know that they're going to get judged. So they could have been doing that. I think it's pretty common.
Even though Elaine's 7 months pregnant and...
Well, maybe before she got pregnant, they were doing that.
Tiny mobile home?
I don't know.
Their
Some people are into that.
I guess it's possible. It's definitely
possible.
Well, apparently this is what happened according to Tommy, and what ended up happening though is this went really wrong. Apparently he got triggered by his anger around, I guess, what he saw at the home, the fact that they shared a bed with their son, and that triggered something in him from his past to the point where he basically went into this blackout mode that he said is where he just would, he'd start killing people and he would not really know what he was doing. He went on to say that during these blackout episodes, as he called it, he would wake up in random places covered in blood, not knowing what he'd done. And over the next few days, the flashes of the murders he had just committed would come back in his head. And he told police that he held Keith at gunpoint and then forced him into his car. He then shot him and castrated him and then dumped his body. He then went back and killed the rest of Keith's family. Which, if this happened, it didn't make sense why Elaine wouldn't call the police, or was she restrained? I mean, it did look like she was restrained to a chair at some point, so I guess it is possible that this is what happened. Apparently, the reason why he did it, Tommy said he was very, very angry by this threesome proposition that went to the maximum limit. That's what he said. In the new version of his story, Tommy hopped off a freight train near Ina and saw the for sale sign outside the Dardeen's trailer. He got drunk and then knocked on the door, pretending he wanted to buy their home. Keith let him in, and then Tommy proceeded to overpower him. He forced Keith to tie up Elaine and Peter, and then he made Keith drive his car to the wheat field where Tommy then shot and castrated him. Tommy said he drove the car back to the mobile home where he said he raped Elaine and murdered the family. He then drove the family's car to the police station or bank in Benton and left it there. So a couple things here that police thought were odd about this story. Obviously, the fact that Keith would not let a stranger in, even if they wanted to buy his home, he would not do that. Plus, Elaine wasn't raped. I mean, that's the biggest indicator that he's lying. She was never raped. There's no signs of that. So likely his story doesn't hold up.
Is it possible that, and I know nothing, this is coming from a place of knowing absolutely nothing about this type of thing, but is it possible that because she gave birth that there wouldn't be signs of her being raped? Like, you know.
Yeah, how do you even determine that? I always wondered, I'm like, how did they determine that she wasn't?
Especially after a baby was born? I feel like it'd be kind of hard to, but I don't know anything. I mean.
Well, I think guess if there's like DNA or semen or.
I guess, but there's so much with the baby that I'm just like.
Right.
I
feel like that would definitely probably make that harder, honestly, because your body obviously like goes through a lot of damage and like rips and stuff while giving a baby.
Is there also a possibility that this is just a false confession? I think there's obviously a possibility.
There's always a possibility. And didn't the case we covered last week had multiple?
Yeah. It happens so much.
Often.
It really does. And there was a huge case of false confession like a couple years earlier than this. So it was kind of fresh in their minds that this could be a possibility. Also thought it was interesting that when Tommy was talking to investigators, he told them that he would disassociate when he killed. And, you know, some of the details would come back to him and many of the other details of the crimes did not. So it could be a reason for why he knew some of the details of the crimes and not others. And he did know a decent amount of information for somebody who was completely uninvolved with this. I think that's very, very difficult to just make up. And now, like when investigators are interrogating, sometimes they lead you, with questions and kind of lead you with the answers. So there's a possibility that that's what happened in this case. But I think there's a real possibility we're dealing with an actual serial killer, confirmed serial killer, that this could absolutely be the case where he remembers certain things about what he did, but not others.
Yeah. I mean, it is definitely possible the human brain can do that.
Yeah. And he did know stuff that the public didn't know. So where would he have gotten that information from? Is he just psychic?
No, that's a good point.
He was also diagnosed with several mental disorders, including bipolar, major depression, and psychosis, which I think is very important to note. Also, he later on talked about how killing felt like the first time he did cocaine. He was addicted to the rush and he liked to watch the eyes of his victims fade.
Ew, it's so sick.
He believed he was setting their souls free. He also said that he killed children so they wouldn't have to live through what he had lived through as a child.
Yeah, that's real logical.
Yeah, right. And he actually confessed to all of this in 2000. And at this time, Joanne, Keith's mother, was convinced that Tommy was the killer. But the more he changed his story, the more she doubted the confession. Also, the police found no physical evidence linking Tommy to the murders. But I mean, they didn't DNA test anything. That's what's crazy about this, is that the family's still trying to get the police department to DNA test whatever items they have from these scenes. They should have at least something, test the blood. There's probably going to be somebody else's DNA in there along with Keith's especially, and probably from the home as well. I mean, unless this guy he did clean, so maybe he knew how to cover up everything and there's not going to be any DNA there.
That's so hard.
Yeah.
That is so hard. You have to be like a ninja pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. It's very difficult to just
with that many people dead in a home. I don't know. That's hard.
But they need apparently the police need like a real reason to do it. Like they need some, it's expensive to do that. There's, limitations and, regulations that they have to follow with, testing DNA. So they need enough evidence to go and do that. And unfortunately, there's just not much evidence here. And in these different versions of stories that Tommy told, there were some other inconsistencies as well. In one story, he talked about how he left Elaine's body in one position, and in another, it was something completely different. And when he was flustered, apparently he would develop a stutter, which allowed him to try out several answers before kind of landing on the right one. So I don't know. I think it's very tough with him. I think there's a possibility that this is all just really him, and this is just how he is, and he did do all of this. But I think there's also a possibility that as a serial killer, he's probably just trying to get as high of a number as he possibly can at this point, that he might be, lying about some of this stuff. And obviously his stories aren't staying straight. And for a long time, the Dardeen family believed that Tommy Lynn Sells was guilty, and the community felt the same way. One day, though, when Anita, Keith's sister, got her mail from her mailbox, her newspaper was inside a manila envelope. And in the envelope, The mail carrier had written her a note that said, quote, "I did not want you frightened when you opened the mailbox. There's a picture of that man who killed your brother." So obviously a picture of Tommy Lynn Sells. And I don't know if somebody was just like being an asshole and sending them a picture of the serial killer, or if there's, something more there. Maybe he sent it to them or dropped it in their mailbox. But with no physical evidence at all, the police could not charge Tommy for the murders. In 2010, Joanne wanted to meet Tommy, actually. She wanted to go sit down in prison with him. And she believed that talking with him face to face might help her figure out, if he was guilty or not. Tommy didn't refuse this meeting, but he did question how it could possibly help her. And as a result of this, the two never met in person. And we can go into a whole episode on Tommy Lynn Sells at a later time because there is a lot more to his case. But basically, Tommy Lynn Sells was put to death in Texas in 2014 via lethal injection. And, he's still a suspect in this case. And actually on the police binders in the police station, listed on the binders as suspect, and the only suspect is Tommy Lynn Sells. So with all that being said, let's consider the different theories here and different other potential suspects. So if it wasn't Tommy, and I think Tommy is a very, very strong suspect in this case. I think there's a lot of, I think the fact that he knew things that the public didn't know. I mean, how else would he have known these specific things? Obviously, he changed his story, but I think Tommy definitely, I think there could be some significance with some of the things he said. He either knows the person that did it, or maybe he was an accomplice in the murders, or I believe Tommy was definitely capable of committing this complete annihilation of this family. I mean, again, I keep coming back to this was so skilled, so planned out, and it was pulled off, flawlessly. Mm-hmm. He disappeared. He was gone. And it was as if this person had done this a million times before. And that's why I really think that Tommy Lynn, the serial killer, is definitely number one suspect. But let's consider some other possibilities here and some other theories. So another theory that was very, very popular with investigators pretty much right off the bat after this happened was this is the 80s and the height of the satanic panic. And in a lot of cases like West Memphis 3, we've talked about that one. And just during this time period, there was an absolute fear of anybody that claimed that they were a Satanist or a witch.
So misunderstood.
People that are involved in this type of life and belief system. And so anytime there was killings that were of children or of, somebody having their genitals mutilated or something like that, oftentimes police would consider this possibility that maybe this was a ritualistic killing of some sort. And perhaps a group of Satanists or somebody that was Satanist was doing some sort of sick sacrifice or something like that. Well, in this case, actually brought in an individual who was an expert on cults and the occult. And this person completely ruled this out and said, there's nothing here that signifies anything involved with the ritualistic killing. There's just nothing. So they pretty quickly got rid of that idea that this was some type of ritualistic satanic killing. Another interesting possibility that came forward during the investigation was apparently a young woman who was studying forensic science at the time of the murders was also part of the crime scene investigation team. And she believed that this murder was linked to the mob somehow. And she speculated that Keith may have owed the mob money.
He doesn't really seem like the type that would roll around with the mob, though, or like be involved in them in any way.
What's he borrowing money for?
Yeah, his kid's college fund.
Yeah. How is he gambling?
I don't know. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And Joanne has denied this theory as well. She insisted that Keith was very good with money and anything extra went into Peter's college fund.
There you go.
So he would not do that. Another theory that's out there that we've kind of alluded to throughout this is that perhaps Keith had some sort of encounter with another man where, he was hiding their relationship of some sort. Maybe they were having an intimate one and maybe it went really bad. And this individual ended up, taking revenge on Keith and his family, potentially. And I think this is a possibility even with Tommy too, that Tommy may have had some sort of relationship like he claimed, that they met each other at a bar and stuff. Like there could have been some type of intimate relationship there that just went really, really bad for some reason. And that could be another possibility for why, he was worried about a threat. We kept talking about that. Like he clearly had a feeling something bad was going to happen.
Yeah,
and
it seemed like
I
he
wonder
really did.
why.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think that there's clearly something was going on. He was afraid of somebody. To go to the extent to move
that quickly. He was like, put the for sale sign up. We're out of here.
Get the hell out of here. Yeah.
It definitely
maybe he didn't want to be outed for something.
Right. Maybe he knew that something was going to come to light in this small town. You know, he's leader of the church band.
Yeah.
That's, you know, his whole reputation could be completely tarnished if they found out that he was having a relationship with a man, you know, because during these times and in this type of town, definitely was not going to be probably accepted. Yeah. So that's definitely a possibility. I think a very strong one too. And obviously the family denies that completely. They don't believe it, but sometimes you don't really know your family members. I mean, there's always a possibility there's, you know, things that they're not telling you about that could be happening.
Well, they could feel like they can't tell you that they wouldn't be accepted.
Right. There's also a possibility that this was just a completely random thing that happened. This is a freak, I don't know, accident in a way. Like somebody just saw the opportunity and just decided to do it. And we don't have
a freak attack.
A freak attack. Yeah. And there's just no idea. It's just some drifter, some random person who will never know who it is. Unless,
but to pull it off so cleanly.
Yeah, that's my thing.
I highly doubt it wasn't planned in some way.
Right. So it's kind of the list of theories. I mean, there's only so much you can really speculate with this one. And I think we've covered pretty much all the possible scenarios. I mean, let us know if you can think of something else that could have happened. But I think that's pretty much what most people think, is that it was most likely probably Tommy Linsells. I think most people would land on that, or somebody he was having a personal relationship with.
That's what I think too, especially cutting off his genitals. That almost screams like they had a sexual relationship.
Yes, yeah, and they were angry about it.
It doesn't
something.
Prove it.
Right. No, it doesn't prove
it definitely would fit the narrative, the story for sure.
Absolutely. So after a while though, and investigating pretty thoroughly and chasing down every lead that they got, case went cold. There was just nothing left to investigate.
And it's that way to this day.
It is. And Keith's mother, Joanne, has remained committed to getting justice for her son and his family, has talked to the sheriff's office almost every day, to the detective at the time, Mike Anthis, who left the department in 1994, to the new detective that they have working on the case, Detective Serge, actually. So she's really hopeful that hopefully one day this will be solved, and hopefully, you know, they'll get some justice for the Dardeen family.
They told us in the beginning that we need to keep the story out there.
I hope she's right. And maybe the police have more than they're even saying. That's always a possibility.
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, they have binders and binders and binders of thousands of pages of evidence and stuff, and they are considering DNA testing some of the objects that they have, which I'm like, why don't they sit on DNA? Like, if you have a cold case, why are you waiting to test DNA?
I know, and that's got to be so frustrating for the family, especially if they're aware of any of it and they're not allowed to talk about some of it.
I know. I'd be so angry. And I totally get why families of victims are just so like, just hate the system. Like, it's like, it doesn't work. Like, what do you mean you can't test the DNA?
I know. You think they'd do every single thing that they can.
That seems so logical. What are these DNA technicians doing all day? They should be busy around the clock. Like, why there's not enough DNA techs to run DNA? Like, the excuses that we hear is just ridiculous.
It's excuses. That's exactly what it is.
It's just like laziness.
For some
they
other
don't
bullshit
want to
reason.
work harder, figure it out sometimes.
Sometimes people.
Yeah. I'm not saying all the time. There's definitely good investigators, good cops. There's absolutely good people out there. Obviously, cases are getting solved. So it does work. There are people doing their job in solving these cases, but in some of these small towns and just, we've seen firsthand.
Well, they're underfunded, undertrained.
No idea what they're doing. And, DNA, what does that stand for? So,
oh my God, let's hope it's not that bad.
I'm serious.
Well, remember, the biggest thing, oh my God, when Josh and I traveled to Mississippi and covered the Christian Andriacchio case, that was very eye-opening at just how many resources their police department was lacking for a decently large city. Town.
Yeah, it's pretty big for Mississippi.
Yeah, and they weren't even able to do luminol testing. They were using YouTube videos to figure out how to luminol test, dude. That's what the hell? And as a parent, you're just like, I could do this myself probably better than you can. Some of these departments are really, really undertrained It's bad.
It's honestly so frustrating that we won't put our money towards the correct training, whether that's for this type of stuff or training how to help when someone's in a mental health crisis or training when there's a, violent act going on. I feel like it's all about making sure that they have that they have no problem spending thousands of dollars on equipment and having the latest technology or whatever,
So
which
true.
is obviously important, but I feel like these trainings are just as important.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. There needs to be a more diverse training with more scenarios.
I think it's just everything is getting too militaristic.
Totally.
It's the police is like being in the military now, and your expectation is I got to focus on my weaponry and all of that, as opposed to how about what is actually needed to solve crimes. That's your job at the end of the day as a police officer, as a detective, is to solve crimes. Crimes are always going to happen, but we need people that can solve them, not create more crimes. It's our system's completely getting fucked up, and we're losing track of what the police is there in the first place. And so in this case, it's 21 4-inch binders of information, and yet this is still a cold case, and they are
barely any info out there.
Planning to test DNA on some of the objects they have. The case is being handled by Jefferson County Detective Captain Scott Burge, actually. And he hasn't even talked to the family yet. And from the interviews I saw of him, I don't have a lot of hope, unfortunately. I think maybe they'll test it, maybe they'll not. But it's been years, 20 years. I mean, DNA, how much DNA is going to be left there? Obviously, there's going to be something, but it's is it going to be enough to really crack this wide open? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know either.
I don't know. I really, really hope for the Dardeen family. They seem like such nice people that they get some answers and some justice for Keith, Ruby, Orlane, and Casey and Peter.
One thing I had seen in a news report on this case was an interview. I can't remember if it was a brother of Keith or a friend of Keith or someone that was related to Keith, was talking about how at this point they really just want to know why. They're not even interested in knowing who. I mean, of course they're interested, but their main focus is really why. They want to know what this was for. What was the motive? Was Keith into something? Was there a big secret that they didn't know? That's looming over their heads, and I can't imagine how that would feel.
Yeah, no, I mean, just think about it. If you only knew of your family members as, one thing, and they're the most sweet, innocent people, never could be involved in anything that should have them end up like this. I mean, I'm sure that's just so hard to wrap your mind around and just think about why would these are the nicest people.
Yeah.
They, as far as we know, they did nothing wrong. They did nothing, completely innocent in this case. And yet their lives ended in this horrific way. So yeah, I mean, it's gotta be super painful to think about this, but hopefully, and we'll put, if you do know anything out there on this case really hasn't been covered, hasn't seen much TV time. The Oprah show denied him back at a time around this happened, and only America's Most Wanted has covered this, I think. And literally, there's really not much on YouTube. It's very, very
so
undercovered.
Horrific.
Yeah. And this family needs justice. So we'll link below Jefferson County Sheriff's Office number and contact. If you do have information in this case, definitely submit it, or if you know anything regarding the Dardeen family, I'm sure it'd be greatly appreciated. I'm definitely going to leave my thoughts with the serial killer theory, and probably Tommy Lynn Sells was what I'm thinking.
I think
is
so.
the person who did this.
I think that makes sense, or someone else, but same situation.
Yep. So let us know what you think, but that wraps it up for Mile Higher today. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. We'll be back with a Halloween episode next week, right? Halloween's already coming up. So
yeah.
Almost the end of October already.
We're going to try to wear costumes.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll
see if we can get our act together.
Yeah, I know. We never care enough about costumes, I feel like.
But this year we've got it, even though we have nowhere to go.
I know.
And everything's closed. And Halloween's on a Saturday. That sucks so bad. And nothing's open and we all have to stay home.
Well, we can wear costumes inside and dance around on camera for you guys.
That's what I was thinking.
I'm sure that's exactly what they want.
Yes.
Yeah, a full hour of
Tell
dancing.
us what you want from us.
You guys missed the dancing from the old days, right?
Yeah.
If you've been around a while, you know what I'm talking about. All right.
Until next time, stay safe.
And stay woke.